I really love these guys. One of the reasons I really love shooting the Olympus Micro Four Thirds mirrorless cameras is the ability to adapt old vintage lenses to these cameras. Now there's a ton of old vintage lenses available out there, often very inexpensive, and some of them are really great lenses. And the reason this works on the Micro Four Thirds, or really any mirrorless camera, is that the distance from the lens mount or lens flange to the sensor is a very short distance. And that leaves room to put an adapter on the front of the camera body and then mount the vintage lens on the front of the adapter, make it work. So today we're going to talk about my top 5 reasons why I think if you're shooting Olympus Micro Four Thirds or really any mirrorless camera, you should be using vintage lenses. And I think you're going to find my top 5 reasons to be somewhat different than you may have seen on maybe some other videos. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. Towards the end of the video, I'm going to talk about where you can find these lenses, where you can get the adapters, and how to put them together and make it work. So please join me for this. If you would, please click on the like and subscribe button down below, and let's get started. My first reason for using vintage lenses on the Micro Four Thirds mirrorless cameras is the history of these lenses. Now, these lenses represent a long history of optical lens design and development. And most of these lenses that you can adapt are going to be from maybe the 30s through the 80s or 90s even. And the development of optics through that time is just really amazing. So there's vintage lenses that have very simple optical designs like Cook triplets, or there's designs that are much more advanced like double Gauss designs. And using these lenses enables you to experience that history through these lenses mounted on your mirrorless camera. It is really just some amazing lenses. This one, in fact, is one that, and you may have seen it on a previous video, I'll link it down below, that I actually removed this lens from a Vietnam War era gun camera. I mean, this was mounted at one time in an airplane, a jet probably, and it was used to film aerial fight scenes. I mean, so the history of this lens to me is just really fascinating, that I can now mount this on my Olympus camera and go out and take pictures with it and, you know, share in the history that this lens, you know, was part of. So to me, the history of these lenses, the history of optical design, and being able to try all these various lenses from different ages, to me is just really a fantastic thing. I think it's just another great way to experience history. The second reason I really love shooting with vintage lenses is being able to experience all the different characteristics of every manufacturer. Now, each manufacturer, when they design lenses, they have their own theories, their own ideas about what constitutes a great lens. And, you know, every lens manufacturer does this a little bit differently. And if you take, you know, a Nikon lens and shoot pictures with it, you take a Minolta lens, a Pentax lens, a Leica lens, you know, every lens you try is going to give you a little bit different look, even for the same focal length. You know, it may look similar, it's the same size image, but there'll be differences, especially when you're shooting color. So to me, it's really fascinating to learn about the different manufacturers and how they have designed their lenses and the images that they produce. Now, for just an example, if you look at a Nikon lens, and you'll see that this coating on this lens has a very blue-green reflection that it gives you. But if you look at this Mamiya lens, it's very warm, it's very brown, and this is not too dissimilar from Minolta. And so each of these manufacturers, their lens coatings, the glass they use, all these things, the designs themselves are all unique to that manufacturer. And of course, each manufacturer tries to make their lenses within their range of lenses similar. In other words, you don't want to change from a wide angle lens to a normal lens from, you know, like if you're shooting Nikons and have a big color shift in your images or something. So they tend to settle on certain design aspects that are similar throughout their entire range of lenses. But to me, being able to try out lenses from a variety of different manufacturers and see how they look, see how they render images, is to me just fascinating. There's a lot of people that decide one brand or another is the cat's meow, and that's what they use. They'll just settle on one brand of vintage lenses. You know, and if you talk to, let's say for an example, if you talk to Leica photographers, people that shoot Leica cameras, they'll tell you that there's a Leica look that is unique to their equipment, and they'll tell you they can look at a photograph and tell you if it was shot with a Leica camera. And you know, and that may be true. I mean, I've shot Leicas, and the lenses and the images, they do have a unique look. It's kind of hard to say exactly what constitutes a Leica look, but I'm sure Nikon photographers and Pentax photographers and, you know, every photographer, you know, feels that to some degree, that they can identify images shot with a particular brand, and there are subtle differences. So it's really fun to me to try the different manufacturers, to see how those lenses render images, and be able to experience that without having to go, you know, back in the film days, you had to have a Nikon camera for a Nikon lens and a Pentax camera for a Pentax lens, etc. So now with the mirrorless cameras, I can put just a variety of different lenses on these cameras and experience what each manufacturer does. So it's, to me, being able to try the different manufacturers and see how their lenses perform is just fascinating. So that's my second reason. The third reason that I really love vintage lenses is quality. Now, today's lenses are really beautifully made, don't get me wrong, but they're largely plastic, and they're not really designed with the same thoughts in mind that these lenses were. And if you ever pick up, this is an old Takumar lens, if you ever pick up an old lens like this, you know, turn the aperture ring, it just clicks from f-stop to f-stop just so precisely. The focus ring on these things are just butter smooth. They're just, I don't know how you could design something that you could turn and make it feel that's, you know, any more smooth than that. The quality of these things is exceptional. And the thing that's extraordinary is, you know, today we have all kinds of computer-aided machining and stuff that they can machine parts. They didn't have all that stuff back then. These had to be, I mean, they're not totally hand machined. There was some automation, but the quality of the machine work, the quality of the materials is just amazing. It's the kind of like the rolls, you know, the Swiss watch, the Rolex of lenses. You know, if you pick up an old Nikon lens, the quality, again, just the feel of the focus and the aperture and everything about it. I mean, these things, if you pick one of these up compared to a modern lens, they're solid feeling. They have some heft to them. They're just, when you use these things, you know you've got something that's just beautifully made in your hands. They're just gorgeous. And you know, even going back into the 30s and 40s, 50s, this lens was made in 1953. It's a Leica lens, just beautifully made. Again, the focus is just really smooth. Everything is just so precise on it. And things like this were made at a time when craftsmanship was just a key factor in how they made products back then. So quality is, to me, you know, you pick up today's lenses and stuff, and they're, of course, they're made of modern materials. There are lots of polymers or plastics in them. Even some of the lens elements now are plastic, and there's nothing wrong with that. They take great pictures. Certainly the optical designs of today are just fantastic, but somehow they just don't really have the feel that these do. So when you pick one of these up, if you haven't ever experienced that, you're going to find yourself really captivated by the quality that these things have. It's just, it really is fun to use. So that's my third reason, is quality. My fourth reason for using vintage lenses are the optical characteristics of some of these lenses. Now, you know, there were some great lenses from that era, but there were also some that weren't so great. At least we didn't consider them great back then. And like, this is an old Pentacon 50mm lens. And back in the 70s and 80s, if you'd offered me this lens, I'd have passed. I just like, nah, that's not a very good lens. I don't want that. And I wouldn't even consider really using it. Today, a lot of these lenses are considered art lenses. This Pentacon 50mm has some really unique optical characteristics that make it desirable to use in today's photography. One of the things that's really interesting about this lens is how close it focuses. It focuses down to just right under a foot. And so it's almost like a macro lens. And the way it renders out of focus backgrounds, the bokeh of this lens is quite unique. It has also a kind of an ethereal look to the images, And so this is a lens that you can buy very inexpensively today, most of the time for around $20, and it has some really unique optical properties. There's a lens that's very popular right now. I don't own one, but they're called the Helios. And the Helios line of lenses are very popular for the look that they produce. Again, they're an art lens, and the out of focus backgrounds that they render are very unique and actually create a swirling effect on the out of focus highlights. And so there's a lot of lenses that you can get from looks you can get from vintage lenses that you can't really reproduce with modern lenses at all. And some of these lenses that have these unique properties, like I say, are very affordable, very inexpensive, and there's just no way to reproduce the look you get from these lenses with modern lenses. It just won't happen. So that's my fourth reason. The optical characteristics of some of these lenses are really just wonderful. The fifth and final reason why I use vintage lenses is value. The price that you pay for these lenses versus the performance you get from them is just tremendous. A lot of times these lenses can be had for very little money. You know, I buy them at thrift stores, flea markets, yard sales, online marketplaces, you know, even online auctions. But, you know, I've gotten my best deals at flea markets and thrift stores, to be honest. And often you're buying not just a lens, but they'll have a camera with 2 or 3 lenses and you know, sell them as a set. I actually at a thrift store one time bought a really huge camera bag with 2 Nikon camera bodies, I think 5 or 6 lenses. One of them was this 105-25, and all really great lenses, and I paid $29 for the whole thing. And it's just, you know, you can't get that kind of value buying modern lenses new. So the value in these is really tremendous. I mean, a lot of photographers will actually purchase a focal length of a lens and try it with a vintage lens, and if that focal length is useful to them, then they might go buy the digital version. I mean, like this 300 millimeter Nikkor, I can adapt this to my Micro Four Thirds camera. It's a beast of a lens, and on Micro Four Thirds it's equivalent to a 600 millimeter lens. Now that's a lot of lens, and I can, you know, buy one of these relatively inexpensively, try it out, see if that focal length is something that's useful to me. Is it too long? Is it too short? Is it gonna fit what I need? And then if it is, it helps me make a decision about, do I want to go ahead and invest a larger amount of money, a much larger amount of money, in a new, say, Olympus, you know, lens of similar focal length. And so this these lenses just represent a tremendous value in terms of being able to take pictures with lenses that you might not afford otherwise. Value is a big criteria for me, and it's not just about the fact that I can buy them and they're cheap. The quality versus the price is really high, and so the value in these lenses are real important to me. How do we make all this work? Let's say you go to the thrift store and you find a really neat lens, get a great deal on it, looks really great, and here's the thing to be aware of when you're looking at lenses, especially when you're buying them and you can actually handle them before you buy them. Look through them. Open the aperture up wide as opposed to stop down, and if you can, look at a bright light through the lens. And if you look at a bright light through the lens and it looks clear and clean, then you're in good shape. Optically, you know, a few dust specks is no big deal, but if you see a lot of haze or it looks foggy, then it's probably not going to take very good pictures. Now, if you're getting it cheap enough that you could have it cleaned, then that might be an option, or you could learn to do that yourself. There's a lot of videos these days on how to do that, but if it looks clean and clear, then you're going to be in good shape. Now, one thing to really watch for is fungus. If you see little spider webby looking you know, filaments and patterns in there, then chances are the lens may have damage that can't be repaired. So, you know, generally speaking, I'll pass on a lens that has any significant amount of fungus in it. Now, the other thing to watch for is the aperture mechanism. You know, the lens aperture, as you turn the ring, should open and close. Some lenses don't actually close when you just turn the ring. There'll be a little lever on the back you might have to flip to make it open and close. But if you can play with the lens, the aperture mechanism should open and close pretty freely. Some lenses actually have an auto or manual switch on them, and you can switch from auto to manual. But again, when you switch it so that the lens stops down, the aperture blade should move really freely. If they move sluggishly or they're stuck, and look, especially if you look at the blades inside and they look oily, then the lens is probably going to need some repair. So those are some things to kind of watch for when you buy lenses. But let's say you find a lens, you think it's going to be a great lens, it looks nice and clean and clear inside, the aperture blades move freely, the focus turns smoothly, it looks just like it's a great lens. How do I get a mount for it? How do I get an adapter? Well, most of my adapters I have purchased online from eBay, to be honest, and I've paid as little as around $10 and as much as I think maybe $20, $25 for adapters. One brand that I've kind of settled on for two reasons. One is they seem to be priced very reasonably, and second is they have, quality wise, they have been great, is a brand called Fotasy. I don't know if you can see that. It's F-O-T-A-S-Y, and they make a wide range of adapters, and so you have to search for an adapter that, like this is a Nikon F lens, and you want to put it on a Micro Four Thirds camera, so you look for an adapter that it goes from Nikon to Micro Four Thirds, and in this case it'll be labeled like it says NK for Nikon -M43, and each, in the description on the sale on eBay, it'll tell you what it's made to fit. But I've had really good success with these, and to be honest, the people that sell these Fotasy adapters, every time I've ordered them, they've thrown in a bunch of extra body caps and back caps and some free stuff. They've been really good to work with. One time I did get an adapter that was incorrect, and they immediately fixed it. I mean, the customer service was just fantastic. So I can speak from experience, having good success with that. There are some other brands. Photodiox is another one that is, I think, very popular, and it's F-O-T-O-D-I-O-X. And there's some others, and you'll see some adapters that are like unbelievably expensive, and to be honest, I don't think they're worth spending the money on. Those are a couple of brands. You can find them, like I say, on eBay. I'm sure you can get them from some other online sources, and but they're very inexpensive. Like I say, I've paid as little as $10 for some of these. These mounts, the lens will mount on the adapter pretty much like it was mounting on a camera body. You just put it on and turn until it latches, and then it's ready to fit on your Micro Four Thirds camera. Once you have a lens and an adapter, that will fit on your camera just like it was a Micro Four Thirds or whatever mount you have. It'll just fit on there. Now, your camera, most mirrorless cameras have some focus aids. One is called focus peaking. And focus peaking, when you get in focus, it highlights areas that are in focus. They get kind of a bright outline, and you can choose different colors. Some have like white or blue or red. You can choose different colors for that highlighted area. And it's almost fascinating. As you turn the focus ring, you can see that highlighted area move in and out on the image. And so you can focus very accurately with that. Also, a lot of cameras have a magnifier where you can push a button and it puts a little marker in the center of the image. You can push it again. It's the same marker that it uses for autofocus, and then it'll blow that area up really large, and you can critically focus and then push the button again. It'll jump back to normal magnification, and you can take a picture. I like to set my camera on aperture priority, and then I'll just set the aperture on my lens, whatever aperture I want to use. The camera will choose a shutter speed that's appropriate for it. If you want to shoot all manual and you're into that, you absolutely can. The metering in your camera will tell you if you're over or underexposed, and you can choose a shutter speed like you normally would, but the aperture you'll actually choose on the lens instead of one of the controls on your camera. If you have a mirrorless camera and you haven't tried using vintage lenses, I really highly recommend it. There's just so much to experience with lenses, and you can do it so inexpensively that it's just a lot of fun to try these different vintage lenses if you have a mirrorless camera. That's it today. I really appreciate you joining me. If you have any questions or comments, please leave me a comment. I always love hearing from you. And as always, thanks for watching.